Preparing to live stream the meeting, it says. Well, it says in the corner here that the meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. There's a 20-second delay. So we're live.
Okay. Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing good.
I think we should start with maybe the origin story. I think Join the Dots Forward is a really great name. You might not. So the name is a mishmash of the Steve Jobs commencement speech where he talks about you can't connect the dots forward. You only know, in other words, you don't know why something has happened. It's only when you get there, you look back, you go, oh, if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't have ended up here.
Yes, I remember that. It's actually been a very long time since I've seen or read that speech.
So I've deliberately changed it to Join the Dots Forward.
Okay.
And that's what this adventure is.
We can go with that now.
Let's go with that now. It might change.
We can go with that at least for now.
Let's do that for now. So the idea is that we'll pick a question and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And explore and see where it goes, and we'll end up joining some dots forward.
Okay, cool.
Now, we've been messaging yesterday, today about which question to pick. And you didn't really have a preference, did you?
Not massively. Didn't massively have a preference. I had a random thought earlier, which was nothing to do with any of the topics. I was in the car with Albie.
Mm-hmm.
For anyone that's listening, that's my 3-year-old. And we just had a Spotify mix playing. And it's like a mix of his songs, my songs, Lauren's songs, whatever songs get played on our Spotify account. And Under the Bridge came on, yes. Right, which is great. And, he kind of likes songs where he can hear the name of the song in the song.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And he likes to know what songs are called. He's like, what's this one? But it struck me that Red Hot Chili Peppers, for me, are one of the great bands of all time because, right? Well, yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
They have incredible cross-genre appeal. So people who are metalheads like them, people who are into hip hop like them, people who are into grunge like them, people who are into, I don't know, indie like them, and people who are into rap like them, they have an incredible cross-genre appeal. And I'm not saying that everyone likes them. That's not by any means what I'm saying, but they have a very broad reach in terms of who likes their music in a way that, I don't know, let's go for a same era band like Pearl Jam doesn't. Pearl Jam doesn't have the same you're not going to necessarily get someone who's really into hip hop listening to Pearl Jam the way you'll get them listening to the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I think you're making an interesting point. I can see that.
And it got me wondering about whether there are other bands like that have a similar cross-genre appeal.
There are.
And I couldn't think of many.
Really? Any?
I wondered if Foo Fighters had a similar cross-genre appeal, but I don't think that it's quite the same.
No.
But I thought you might have some thoughts.
I can think of one. The Prodigy.
Yeah. They probably fewer genres that they're bridging, but yeah, in a similar way.
Because
people who'd be into rock would listen to them. People who are into rap or electronica or jungle or whatever would listen to them. Yeah, they had different genres, but yeah, similar.
Yeah, because I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers were massively inspired by Stevie Wonder and funk, and the Flea and his bass playing was all very heavily driving the groove. What was interesting about the Red Hot Chili Peppers is how many guitarists they've had. It's like Spinal Tap and the drummers. I can think of 4. Hillel Slovak was the first big one. John Frusciante, Dave Navarro, and then John Frusciante came back, and Josh Klingenhofer or something he's called, something like that. Yeah.
I couldn't have named any of them off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Not my specialist subject.
The other thing I would say about the Red Hot Chili Peppers is that even the people in my school, the boys and some of the girls in my school, they know them. There's not many bands, or maybe it's because they're the guitarist that I speak to, but we've performed Red Hot Chili Pepper songs and it communicates. They understand, they remember them. But actually, we performed Pearl Jam, to be fair, and that they knew that song. But there's other stuff that I assume they would know that they just don't. But I think that when I like talking about Nirvana is now like nearly 30 years old. Nevermind is nearly 30 years old.
Yes. That makes me feel pretty old.
It should. It makes me feel old. Next year, 1991, it was released.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, pretty sure it's 91. So it's nearly 30 years old.
Yeah.
I can't. I didn't even get into them.
Definitely didn't have a similar cross-genre appeal.
No, I think they create the genre.
Yes. Or even if they didn't create it, they really established it. Like they were the epitome of grunge. It was like through and through. You say, grunge, Nirvana is synonymous with it. But they didn't have the same cross-genre appeal as Chili Peppers.
That's interesting idea. True. Never really thought about it. Although I do think when I listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit, I don't think it sounds dated. But maybe that's because it just reminds me of being in my 20s.
I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of modern grunge, so I don't know if it has a dated sound within that genre.
Is there such a thing as
and it doesn't sound dated
grunge?
I don't know, like whatever kind of similar genre bands there would be, rock, but it's not quite rock. Like it was a very specific sliver of rock. But I can't quite remember where I was going with that. They definitely it's definitely synonymous. They were the epitome of grunge.
Although I was playing Nevermind in a car once with a colleague, and so this was about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a bit longer. And he said, "Is this the Foo Fighters?"
We're about to have our first Zoom bomb.
Are we?
Yeah, I think so. I think Albie's about to break in to say hello or say goodnight.
Is that the door rustling? I can hear?
That's that what that is? We're trying to do the door handle.
He hasn't made it yet. He's gonna break on through, hopefully.
You ready for it? Oh, hi.
Daddy?
Yes.
Can you carry me up?
I can't, Boo Boo, but that's very sweet.
I need to just carry me up and then you come back down.
Say hi to James.
Hi. It smells like Teen Spirit already, doesn't it?
We were just talking about the song that we listened to in the car, Under the Bridge. Do you remember listening to that song? Yeah?
We're being Zoom bombed again. There's a wife.
Oh!
There's Davina. There's a partner, Lauren, who's gone. There's Davina again. Zoom bombing is going to become a thing on Tuesday night. This is the pilot episode.
I'll carry you to the door, Albie.
Yeah.
It's a moth. Okay, ready?
Get that moth out.
It's already outside. It's actually caught on a spider's web outside the window. Okay, ready? Let's go. To the door. Right. Go. Come on. Come on.
This was actually one of the questions that Adam and I were going to talk about, which I will introduce in a bit. But I want to make the point about Nirvana. So the point I was making, I love it. And
Okay.
I think
This-
it's
this
a perfect segue.
It's a perfect segue because we
Perfect segue.
might have our topic for the day.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I did say that while you weren't here. I told the camera, oh, you're going to
Yeah, right up.
Okay, I'm actually going to have to carry him right up. Otherwise, we're liable to have a meltdown.
Okay.
Okay, carry you right up really fast. Okay.
So I'm going to talk to the camera whilst you're not here.
Yes, that's fine.
I'm going to finish the Nirvana story and then segue into the question. So Adam's putting his baby boy to bed, well, not baby, 3-year-old to bed. And the story I was saying before we were Zoom bombed, both by my wife and Adam's son and Adam's partner, Lauren, was I was playing Nevermind in the car 6, 7, 8 years ago, and a colleague, admittedly, he's younger than me, he heard Nirvana Nevermind playing the album, and he asked, "Is this the Foo Fighters?"
Teen Spirit?
It wasn't Teen Spirit. It was partway through Nevermind, but he asked, "Is this the Foo Fighters?"
Well, you'd say like in part.
Which is, someone else in the car turned around and was like, "What on earth are you talking about? How do you not know this album?" And to be fair, I think he's quite a bit younger than I am. But it
The album was probably 20 years old when he was born.
Well, he wasn't. No, it wasn't a pupil. It was a colleague. So it's
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. So it did make me feel old. But what you're saying about that being synonymous with a particular sound, I think, and you talk about modern grunge, like kind of like the Foo Fighters continued that, and I think there's definitely a sound that Nirvana has that the Foo Fighters continued, although they've expanded and explored it. I think.
Yeah, definitely. Like their sound is definitely distinct from Nirvana's sound. No question.
Mostly because of the voice and the lyrics and all sorts. Yeah. Although I do think the first Foo Fighters album is amazing. That's one of my favorite albums.
Yes, it's an outstanding album.
And I haven't got any of the others, to be fair. I've got the odd song.
I don't have any albums at this point, so I think all my CDs are in a box in my parents' loft.
Oh, wow, okay. Then what I would say is I haven't listened to a whole Foo Fighters album except the first one in its entirety. Only the first one.
All right, segue us.
I will segue us. So we were talking, Adam and I were talking earlier this day, today, a few days ago, as I said earlier, on what question are we going to engage with? How are we going to join the dots forward, maybe? And one of the things, so I've just turned 44. Adam's 47. Sorry, he's not really 47. He just looks 47. No, Adam's 40. And we've been talking about age and getting old and the Chili Peppers and listening to Smells Like Teen Spirit, reminding us of making us feel old, reminding us when we were young, released in 91. And then we were interrupted by Adam's son, which is one of the questions that we were talking about. That sounds really cool. One of the questions we were talking about was, what are the biggest challenges in fatherhood? And I think there's what it's like being old, when maybe being old thinking you're young. That's something I deal with a lot, and I'm not a father, but Adam and I talk a lot.
Or maybe
about
getting
that kind of
older.
Getting older?
Yeah, as opposed to being old. I don't know that I would say that either of us at this point are old. Certainly old in comparison to maybe your students or to Albie or whatever.
Middle-aged.
Yeah, middle-aged. Although middle-aged is getting pushed back a bit. As people's average age or ultimate age. The oldest person in the world is getting older, and the number of people reaching 100 is growing. As people live longer, middle age is getting pushed later.
Mm-hmm.
marriage is getting pushed later, adolescence is almost getting pushed later.
Well, I mean, I said being old quite deliberately because I would associate being old with someone who, it's going to sound really bad, doesn't evolve, can't evolve. And something I felt very aware of recently is remembering a time without the internet, without computers, growing up in that world of cassettes and singles, and then now living in this super fast digital world.
Yeah.
And like we're having a conversation over Zoom quite naturally.
Yeah. And
being old.
You and I are of a very particular, very small, like 5-year generation between about 77 and 82 or something like that, like whatever it is.
76.
Okay, it might be a bit broader, but whatever, 76 and 83, let's say. Whatever. There's a slim sliver of people who, and this, we've discussed this, and I think we even stuck it in a message to me, maybe even in this discussion about what we were going to talk about, that we're of a particular age where we had a very definite analog childhood and a digital adulthood. And anyone born before us had both an analog childhood and then at least part of an analog adulthood. And anyone born after us had digital during their childhood. And, computers weren't a thing, even like they were starting to become a thing at the end of school for me.
Okay.
Like, as I was kind of 16, 17, 18, like they existed. It's not like they didn't exist, but the internet wasn't a thing. Like, I remember it was a really big deal to run down to the science lab at 17 or 18 years old at lunchtime and, check my emails and wait for the, dial up to connect and go, ka-dung, ka-dung, ka-dung.
There's something very nostalgic about that.
Yeah, it's brilliant, but it's only nostalgic to people who had that like at a particular point.
That's true. I do think
it was just appearing, but it wasn't like digital everything and phone in your pocket and camera in your pocket and like everything, the internet in your pocket, the world in your pocket, all the information in the world in your pocket. Like that wasn't a thing, until I was easily in my 20s. I was like one of the last of my friends to get a mobile phone. They'd all complain. You probably don't know this. You probably remember the two guys that I lived with, Daniel and Simon.
Yeah.
They were my first housemates. And in fact, it's Simon's birthday today, so happy birthday, Simon. They would complain that I'd get the most phone calls out of any of us in our house. This is at like 19, 20, 21 years old. And they were like, of all of us, you need a mobile phone. And I was the only one that didn't have one. I was like, if I'm out, I'm out. Like, what do I need a mobile phone for? Now it'd be weird to not have one.
See, I think this is one of the biggest challenges facing parents and possibly fatherhood. So I just read a book called Indistractable by a guy called Nir Ihal, who wrote a book called Hooked, which is all about designing internet sites and apps that keep people engaged or like addicted.
That are addictive. Yeah.
And then he wrote a counter to that called Indistractable. And I'm also reading The Shallows by Nicholas Carr. And in Indistractable, he talks about how his daughter is, and the people around it, and himself, are sucked into this addictive world of the internet, mobile phones, notifications, all of that. But what he talks about in The Shallows is even more scary because the technology...
Is this the same author?
Two different authors. Nicholas Carr, The Shallows, the Indistractable by Nir Ihal. But Nir Ihal wrote Hooked, which is all about designing things that
How do you spell
are
that
addictive. Nireyal.
Okay.
I think I'm saying it right. I'm assuming I'm saying it right. So first he wrote Hooked, then he wrote Indistractable. And after I finished Indistractable, I'm now reading The Shallows. What he talks about in The Shallows is how our brains change. And that's a really good thing because it means we can respond and adapt to our environment. And then he says, first there was writing and the printing press, then there was clocks and time, and then it was like the mass availability of books. And now we've got, then it was like TV, cinema, media. Each time there's been a big shift in media, there's been people decrying the way people use their brains. Oh, like when books first appeared, there was a lament that people won't need to actually use their brains anymore because it's all written down. Now, the internet and what you're saying about carrying, in effect, what we have is we carry a TV, a book, a library, a communication, a way of talking to people, like a cinema in our pockets, everything. All these different media are now...
And a torch.
And a torch, and a mirror, and whatever else you want to call it, all converging into one device. He calls it a cheering machine. But what that's doing is actually changing the way our brains are on a physiological level. Our brains are...
I mean, in a way that clocks, books, whatever before this didn't change our brains in the same way that these devices are.
No, they clocks, all of those things before, clocks, the printing press, the book changed the way we started to think and interpret information and perceive the world around us. But the case he's making in The Shallows is that the internet is regressing the way we use our brains. We're all surface and no depth, but reading books encourage us to sit and concentrate and contemplate and engage at a very, very deep level that the internet doesn't. The internet is one big distraction machine that keeps us at the very surface of our usage of our brain, the way we connect ideas together. I do think that is one of the biggest challenges facing parents, fathers, parents. I see it at school, and the more I'm reading this book, The Shallows, the more concerned I'm getting.
Is it either, do you think, or does he talk about that it's a product of the device itself and the information that's available on the device, or is it the way that apps are designed to grab for our attention that's causing that?
So this is a really great question, because in Indistractable, he focuses very much on the way that apps are designed. That documentary currently doing the rounds on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, it talks about it at that level. It's really good.
Yeah.
And very much about apps, distraction, design. What he's saying in The Shallows is much deeper. He's saying that our brains are changing.
Are they changing because of the device, or are they changing because the apps are grabbing our attention in a particular way? Like, I can't remember who wrote it, but there was a really great piece, and I know that you've read it, about the way that people have their phones set up so that the phone stops being a tool. And I know that you and I at one point, although I've kind of changed how I've got my phone set up at this point, you set up and probably still have it set up, I would imagine, knowing you, to have it be very distraction free. Like, I know that I've gotten rid of 80% of my notifications. I still keep some because I want them. The recommendation from that article was
Better Humans on Medium.
It was what?
It was a whole series called Better Humans on Medium, but I can't remember the name of the guy who put it all together, and his name might come to me.
Yeah, but it was like, the notification icon is red because it's attention grabbing. Little things like that. The colors that are used are attention grabbing, across apps. So I'd have to make a guess that the author of The Shallows, say his name again.
Nicholas Carr.
I'd have to make a guess that it's not a function of the device itself that's changing our brain. I'd make the assertion even that it would be the way that designers are designing the apps, because it's a whole economic issue, really, that the more usage and the more user time there is, the more valuable their app is, their company is, the more likely it is to be a unicorn and sell to Google for $1 billion.
But I think that what I'm discovering in that book is he's going a bit deeper. He's actually saying the internet itself, the way it's designed, the way it's structured, can only give rise to a brain that thinks in headlines, or thinks in lots of surface level ideas that are connected together. But a book creates the thinking that's very contemplative and deep, and having to think things through and make your own connections personally with the material in a very different way. The phrase that he used to describe it is a Turing machine, which is, and I'm going to make a complete mess of this, but it's along the lines of the machine influences and adapts itself to human behavior in such a way that human behavior changes, and humans don't even know their behavior is changing. So I haven't, because I'm still reading it, and I'm about like halfway through. I'm just getting more scared as I read it. And I do think about being a teacher, the pupils I teach who won't sit and read. Who won't read a book. And even reading stuff on a Kindle, I find myself like, I'm reading the Kindle and I like it, but then the case he's making in the book is that hyperlinks or hypertext will take you away from the narrative.
Yes.
And sometimes I will. Sometimes I'll highlight a bit. I'll go and Google something and then come back to the book.
Yeah.
And that is something that's, the internet is influencing the way we think, and we don't think it is, and we don't realize how it is.
Interesting.
And I keep thinking of Terminator and the rise of the machines and the Matrix and AI and all of that. I don't know if that's going to ever happen, but
something's going to happen.
Yeah, the singularity. Is it called singularity? It is called singularity.
Is what called singularity?
Have you heard the singularity? The idea of the singularity is where machines and humans. I can't remember what it is. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I have. Harari talks about it in *Sapiens*, but there's also someone that wrote a book entirely about that, which I think called singularity.
A hypothetical point at which technological growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible, resulting in unforeseeable changes to human civilization.
Yeah, somebody wrote a book specifically about that, and Harari talked about it in *Sapiens*, and I've not read *Homo Deus*, but I imagine that he talks about it more in that, or at least talks around it in that. I can't remember who wrote.
I think it's Ray Kurzweil. I think it might be Ray Kurzweil.
Could be, actually. Yeah, could be.
But I'm interested to know. So, given all of that stuff I just said, is technology something that concerns you with your son, with Albie?
Yes. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of technology, and I love technology, and I know that he's going to grow up in a world with technology. Some kind of nuclear holocaust aside, he's going to grow up in a world filled with technology, and I want to introduce him to it, but I already see him showing signs of addiction to television, to an app or whatever, You know, like I was upstairs with Lauren just before our call, and she was trying on some new clothes that she'd bought, and Albie was first of all, he was playing with the cats, and then he was like, I'm going to go downstairs and watch television. And he comes downstairs and he knows how to turn it on, but I've got it set up so that the sound comes through a sound bar, which needs to be turned on separately to the television, and he doesn't really know how to do it. He knows that it needs to be turned on, but he doesn't really know how to do it. And anyway, like I stayed upstairs with Lauren for a little while longer while she was trying things on, and then I came downstairs and Albie was just sitting on the floor in the living room, watching the TV adaptation of The Cat in the Hat, not the Mike Myers thing. I hasten to add, there's an animation on Netflix. I want to say it's on Netflix.
Okay.
There's an animated, serialized version of The Cat in the Hat, which seems vaguely educational. I often, like, if he's watching it, I'm like, today he was watching it and I was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and I could overhear that they were talking about different kinds of tails and different kinds of animals with different kinds of tails, and this one makes a noise and this one curls around a tree, and whatever. So like it's vaguely educational, but what I notice is that turning it off is incredibly difficult and can often create a meltdown, especially if it's a bit too late in the day. Like I say, it's often one of us is cooking dinner and we'll let him watch TV while that's happening. But then, okay, dinner's ready, and if we've pushed dinner a little bit too late, game over. Like it's a full-on meltdown, and it's really difficult. It's really difficult.
Because in Indistractable, he gives some really practical ideas about how to introduce children. I think it's one of the great bits of the book. Introduce children to technology, and he uses the metaphor of swimming. You would, first you might swim like with armbands in the shallow end. You don't take a child and throw them in the deep end necessarily, really.
There's different schools of thought.
And I thought that was, I know, and I think it's a good metaphor for explaining.
I think probably for people listening to this, they might not understand, but it would be akin to kids learning to ride a bike with stabilizers, which is what you and I probably did, but is becoming really outdated. That kids now ride balance bikes, and they use their feet. And they go very, very slowly until they're ready to take their feet off the floor, and then they take their feet off the floor, and they're able to balance, whether it's for 1 foot, 2 foot, 10 feet, whatever. And when they're at that point, then you can just go, okay, here's a bike with pedals. And then they can ride. And Albie's just at that point now where he's had a balance bike and he can balance, and he can go super fast and then just cruise with his feet off the floor. And
balance.
Sometimes he'll do it like knees up like this. He'll just go knees up in front, and sometimes he leans into it and does it like leans into it and goes feet up at the back, which is a bit like the motorcyclist character Keanu Reeves plays in Toy Story 4.
Evel Knievel.
But
he's not called Evel Knievel.
Duke Kaboom, I think it is. The character.
Okay.
Yes, I Canada. It's but it's very funny watching him go push, feet up. But it's similar to that, like the armbands thing, right? That was the link. It's like, armbands are great, and they really inhibit arm movement, and they give a very false sense of flotation. And there are other methods for teaching swimming that, may not be like throw them in at the deep end, like 12 feet. But, for someone who's 3 years old, the shallow end of the pool is equally as deep. Like, if you can't touch the bottom, you can't touch the bottom. It doesn't matter whether you're throwing them in at the shallow end or the deep end. It's deep.
And now I can't help but think of the cover of Nevermind with the baby in the water totally fine, swinging around.
Yeah, totally fine, right? But babies that are born
totally
into
fine.
water are really happy in water. Typically.
However, that wasn't
Certainly
the point
initially.
of the metaphor.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
But
the point of the
circle back
metaphor
around.
was, circle back around. The point of the metaphor was that introducing children to technology can be done. You'd want them to be equipped to be able to deal with it. There's a certain amount of teaching that goes along with it, and he does a really good job of explaining it, even though that metaphor might not work. But he talks about, and I know I've talked about this to you before, that children, young people need three things. They need to experience autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and with other people their age or with other people. And using technology as a tool to be able to understand how it can pull you into another world. And actually, with his daughter, he actually asked his daughter, how long do you think would be appropriate for you to be watching a program it is on the iPad? And his daughter was quite able to say whatever amount of time it was. And then he held her to that. But she was setting the limit. She had the experience of being, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how long I'm going to do it for. And then his daughter agreed it with him, and then they worked on it that way. But that means by the time they're a teenager, they've got much more ability to actually self-regulate, I guess.
Yeah.
Phrase I'd use.
Do you know how old she was?
He does a really good job of explaining it. I don't. It was under 7, I'm pretty sure.
There's a big variation in,
I know.
anything else. Like Albie, who's 3.5, he would have no concept of what 5 minutes means compared to what 50-minute means, compared to what 2 hours means. He has no concept of what that is yet.
But I can't remember what it was, but I highly recommend the book. I think it's great.
Yeah, sounds good.
And it was very. I was surprised. The first half wasn't anything new to me, but the second bit was really started to introduce what effect does technology have on us? What effect does technology have on young people? And what's it like being a parent with technology as an everyday part of life? That was rhetorical.
Yeah. I mean, all of this whole conversation makes me think about the next book that I've got on my list of books to read. I don't know where the heck it's gone. I had it earlier. It was around here. It's called The Brain That Changes Itself. It's a book about neurology and the capacity for humans, the capacity of the human brain to adapt and learn and develop. Because we've sort of touched on this already. Like the notion that you can't teach an old dog new tricks is not true and is never true. The brain is constantly changing.
It wouldn't make evolutionary sense.
Sorry?
It wouldn't make evolutionary sense to not keep changing and adapting and learning.
Yeah. I was going to read you.
What's it called again? The Brain That Changes.
Changes Itself. I was going to read you the back cover. I thought it was just here. Maybe I took it to my bedroom or something.
You must have been reading it.
No, I haven't started it yet. I don't know where it's gone. I must have taken it to the other room. Sorry. It was a recommendation that I think other James, my other friend James, recommended to me several years ago. And then I bumped into it again through Z Health. Oh, and I was going to send you a couple of links to that stuff. And I forgot to do that yesterday. I'll do that for you.
All right.
That was a terrible tangent. Oh, speaking of tangents, I listened to
Yeah.
one of your conversations with Willem.
Okay.
I listened to
Which
it.
one?
Um,
There's like 16 of them now.
yeah, I think it was like 14 or something. It was when should I get a job?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was one of my pupils actually asked me that question. It's so great.
I thought it was really great. I thought the conversation was really great as well. And there's something that's slipping my mind now again. There was something that I kind of wanted to like add to it that about when should I get a job. I can't quite remember what it is now. God, these tangents are terrible for me right now. Like, you know,
They are. And that's why it's not called terrible tangents, it's called teaching tangents. But I want to ask.
No. These are terrible tangents. My tangents right now are terrible. I'm like,
These are terrible.
I'm got my book. Can't remember what I was going to say.
I want to ask you. Don't worry. I want to zoom out. I want to ask you. So, if the question is, what are the biggest challenges in fatherhood, and technology is one of them, what else do you think are big challenges as a father in fatherhood?
It's a really
Now, I could tell you what I think they
a
might
really
be,
good
and then
question,
you can tell me if I'm wrong.
It's a really good question, and it's a really big question.
I know.
One of the biggest challenges, I think, is, and this is something that I'm sort of dealing with and confronting at the moment, is setting boundaries of what works without taking away his autonomy, because he is like right now at 3 years old, he is at that stage where he is developing his own sense of agency and working out the limits of how much he
Sorry,
can.
I'm just going to close the door. I can still hear you. Keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, working out the limits of how much he can control the world around him. And it's really important to me that he learns that he has control over the world around him. It's one of the reasons that I don't like school. It totally takes away children's autonomy and sense of agency, you know, when you're told what to do and
An ability to self-regulate and so many things.
exactly. And at the same time, like, I don't want him to watch 4 hours of television every day. Like, I want to be able to, you know, give him some more time. Like, he's really interested in watching Thomas the Tank Engine or The Cat in the Hat. I'm like, I'm okay with that. He's like, I want to do that. Like, he has a desire. I'm like, great, go towards that. I want you to be able to do that. And I don't want it to happen all day, because I know that it's harmful for him to be in front of a screen for too much time, for too long. So how do I do that without getting into a control dynamic? How do I do that where it's not I'm in charge, you're the 3-year-old, do what I say because I say it? And there is something to be said for, this is the way it is because I say so. Like, you know, that's like, you can watch for an hour because I say so. He also like is really into asking why right now. You know, why? He'll go on for ages like that.
I still do that in the middle of a class.
Yeah. You never grew up.
Anyway, it's true. I never grew up. But I'm not being old.
Yeah, but yeah, you're definitely not. So like to explain why doesn't really have much impact. You know, there's no
reasoning
for like, you can watch television for an hour because, you know, it's harmful to watch too much. Right. Be bonkers, right? Why? Like, you know, incidentally, I've discovered that the best way of dealing with that is go, that's a really good question. Why do you think?
Which is basically what I do in class.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then what? Does he actually engage with the question? Is he actually
No.
is he actually
No, it just
thinking through, or
like
is he
stops it in its tracks.
Oh wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. Because he doesn't really know why. You know, the other one, which is, you know, I guess I kind of got from my dad, is just because. Why? Because my dad's version, which I think might be like a, you know, 50-year-old something from Israel, is, you know, because Coca-Cola. I don't know. It's
that makes no sense at all. Maybe it isn't meant to.
But again, it like sort of stops the conversation, that the why stops it in its tracks in much the same way.
Because Coca-Cola.
Yeah. And it may have some historical reference, maybe like some 1970s Israeli cultural reference or something like that. Like, I have no idea, you know, but growing up, that's what it was for me. Why? Because what? Because Coca-Cola. But yeah, you know, turning it around to Albie of like, that's a really good question. What do you think?
So we're talking about technology. We're
Yeah.
talking about this idea of setting boundaries and like wanting to,
and not getting into this control dynamic of like, I'm in charge.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's,
you know, just
really important.
Do what I say because I say it. Like, I want him to have control over his own life. I want him to experience ownership of what he does, and I don't want to inhibit that. And at the same time, like, I want to inhibit certain things. You know, like there are certain boundaries. Like, you know, like I didn't tell you this, but yesterday, so we have these two kittens, right? For anyone that's new, like, we have two kittens that are about 9 weeks old at this point, right? They're really young. We got them about 3 weeks ago, and Albie, bless him, adores them. Like, he loves them, but he constantly wants to pick them up. Like, and he picks them up like under their armpits. They like hang there like this, and we're like, so this is another one. It's like, okay, they're little kittens, right? They're little kittens, and like, you just can't be like picking them up all the time. Like, they're starting to show signs of being scared of him, like running away from him a little bit, and like,
really?
they are amazing.
Okay.
They're incredibly tolerant of him. So like, they don't do anything. They don't swipe at him or anything like that. But I'm starting to see signs that they're getting a little bit afraid, right? And then yesterday, one of them comes shooting into the kitchen, going meow, 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 right? And I was like, what happened? Like, you know,
wow,
red alert, right? And I went into the living room, and Albie was like looking at me really sheepishly. I was like, why did which one was it? Cookie, right? Why did Cookie just run into the kitchen crying? And he was like, she wasn't crying, she was meowing. I was like, okay, but that sounded like her crying meow. Why was, you know, what happened? He was like, I didn't do anything. He's like, I didn't do anything. I'm like, okay, I didn't say you did anything. I was just asking what happened that Cookie ran into the kitchen making that noise. And he went, oh, I did this. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, oh, I was swinging. Oh no, he went, I was swinging her. I went, what do you mean? He went like this. He said, what do you mean you were swinging her like that? He was like, and I was like, were you holding her? He went, yeah. What were you holding? her leg. Right? So he's like grabbed hold
He's
of her
holding
leg.
her leg.
And I don't know if he's like swinging her around like a lasso, or if he's like, swinging her side to side, like across, like side to side, like this, or like, I don't know what's happened. All I know is the cat has like made a very definite, I don't like this noise, and bolted out of the living room into the kitchen. Right. And then Albie's told me that he's done something. So like, there is a certain boundary that I want to set of what he's allowed to do. With the cats, right? Like, because I don't want them to get hurt. The other thing that happened, and I think I told you this, was again
the box thing.
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't the box thing, right? That's he's put the laundry basket over one of them and like left it in there, and Lauren walked in and found it. But I walked into the living room, and he's like huddled down in the corner of the living room where there's this wicker basket with all his train tracking. Right?
Yeah.
And I go over and I have a look at what's going on. And the kitten is in the basket with the lid closed, with its head sticking out of the handle at the side of the box, right? The little gap in the wicker basket.
Yeah.
And it's stuck. And he turns around, he's like, it's okay. She's still alive. I'm like, and honestly, for a moment, I was really concerned because she was really kind of limp. Like, and she was actually totally fine. But like, there are a few things that are happening now where it's like, that's not okay. Like, it's just not okay for him to be terrorizing the kittens. Like, A, I don't want them to get hurt or killed. And B, assuming that doesn't happen, I don't want them to grow up and him to grow up with them being scared of him and eventually like swiping at him. So there are boundaries that I want to be able to set. And I'm struggling to find a way to be like, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. There, without it being just because I say so, because I'm in charge. And that for me right now is the biggest challenge. How do I give him agency and control over his life, and at the same time protect the kittens and ensure the maintain the relationship of him with the kittens as they get older? It's really difficult.
It really sounds like those three things that he talks about in Indistractable that younger people need as they grow up: the autonomy, the competence, and the relating. Maybe those three things are going to manifest themselves as he gets older, and you're going to have a whole kind of discovery about how do you manage that? How do you allow him to develop his autonomy but have boundaries? How do you allow him to develop his competence without helping him? How do you allow him to have the friendships and discover what it is to interrelate with other people without getting himself into trouble and hurting himself or doing anything he shouldn't? But I think it sounds like this core, it sounds like it's really important. It sounds like really important for every child, every dad in that whole world of not wanting to be the power, set up that power dynamic, but it's still allowing them to have.
And I don't know, like I'm agency. Sure that some dads are just really happy to be like, I'm in charge. I'm the dad. I say how it goes. I'm in charge. And go for your life. If that's what you want, go for your life. I kind of think that there are natural consequences to that. And I'm actually a big fan of natural consequences. Like, if you do that, this will happen. If you pull your toy in this direction, it will break. And then you won't have it. Like, that's a natural consequence. And again, that's like one of those things where I'm torn between don't do it because I don't want it to break and I don't want to have to replace it. Now, obviously I don't have to replace anything, but often, and I'm struggling to think of a good example, but it's like that's something that I really enjoy him having. It's like it's a toy that I appreciate. And I don't want it to get broken and then I don't want to replace it myself. Not that I don't want to, but I don't want to. But I'm a big fan of, like, if that happens, if you do that, that will happen. And it's just the way it goes. Like, okay, you know what? You wanted to go see the steam train today, but if you don't get dressed, we're not going to be able to go. We're not going to go out. If you don't get dressed, we're not going to go out. It's October.
Yes.
You know, that's kind of a natural consequence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
the
trouble is the natural consequence with the cats is they might die.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And evolutionarily, that's a really good learning process. You know, to deal with death.
Yeah, but it's kind of
right. But it's not what I want in the house in 2020, right? 2020, like maybe we can move beyond that. You know, maybe we can't. You know, maybe that's really what's needed. But I don't want to sacrifice. I don't want to sacrifice the cats for that. But I did say to him yesterday, if you do that, like, this is after, you know, like the swinging them around and then the picking them up and the, you know, throwing them and whatever. And I said, look, Albie, if you keep doing that, we're not going to keep the kittens. I'm not going to have kittens that you terrorize.
Yeah.
We just won't have kittens. Like, and that'll be the natural consequence. You know, which would be a real shame because they're so lovely. They're so lovely.
And they love you.
More than anyone else in the house at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. What you're saying about natural consequence does remind me of how I might manage a class. If you do this, then this will happen. If you interrupt me when I'm explaining something, then it's hard to take you. Well, I don't know what I say. I usually say something like, it's hard for me to take you seriously if you're not listening, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or you're not gonna understand. If you don't listen, you won't understand.
Yeah.
There's you won't know how to do X, Y, Z, or you won't know how to write X, Y, Z, or you won't know how to complete the assignment.
And it is like everything slows down and becomes about that, explaining the consequence of what happens. And then once they're clear, I feel like I can zoom out again. But sometimes I will have to slow it down and like break it down to what. And these are mostly teenagers, 15, 14 to 18.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure my wife does the same thing as me. If you do that, then this will happen. So, yeah, it's human being.
Yeah.
Now it's almost 9 o'clock. So we're going to continue these conversations over the next 7 or 8 Tuesdays.
Yeah.
And I wanted to end by thinking about I wanted to end by introducing some of the things that we're both really interested in. One of the things I'm really interested in is contributing to people. Another thing I'm really interested in is Gallup strengths. Another thing I'm really interested in is reading books. And that's, for me, one of the, and I'm also really interested in ideas and exploring ideas and how they relate to everyday life. That, for me, is one of the great things about a conversation like this. And I know that Gallup strength for me has been a very, very big deal for understanding why I approach things the way I do and how I approach my teaching the way I do. And I think that it's worth, I just wanted to say that as we wrap up, and I don't know where this conversation is going to go next.
I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, leave a comment here. I'll see. I did put a post on Instagram, my Instagram, saying new experiment, join the dots forward. So I posted the link on my bio and Instagram as well. So
yeah, I mean, maybe it's worth me saying something about the areas that I'm interested in as well.
That is exactly what I was going to say to you.
So strengths, like you, is an area of interest and has also been incredibly useful for me in understanding and articulating what I'm good at, and in particular understanding what other people are really great at, and giving me new ways of listening to them and understanding them. Education is, a big one for both of us. particularly alternative education. For anyone watching or listening, my educational background is wide and varied. I've been through state education, home education, democratic education. I went to a circus school. I've been to Steiner schools. I've done the whole lot. And I'm a governor at an alternative primary school, and I home educate my son. Education's a big deal, always has been a big deal. And it's something that I'm really interested in, committed to, like that. Health and diet would be another area of interest for me. Finance and the economy would be another one. And that would also veer into cryptocurrency. So it's something that we can maybe dip in and out of a bit.
Yeah.
It's not a massive focus of mine at the moment, but if people don't know anything about it, they should, like right now in the world.
Do you mean cryptocurrency and the economy, or both?
Yeah, both. Right now in the world, with everything that's going on around the world, it would be an important thing to know and understand.
Yeah. One of the other things I do admire about you is your ability to learn about new stuff. And one of your Clifton strengths in your top 5, as it's called, the Clifton strengths, is learner. And I think that it doesn't matter where these conversations go, but it will be something where I will learn something, or it will get to join the dots forward and explore wherever it goes. I would also add, for me, another area that's really important for me is men and masculinity, and the experience of what does it mean to be a man. And that's something that's really, I talk about a lot, I would say.
Yeah.
So,
how many years in a row have you raised money from Movember?
In a row? I think it's
7. Well, not even in a row. How many times have you done it?
Probably about 12, I think.
Yeah,
maybe. I don't actually know. But
I just sort of assume that every November you're going to be raising money for Movember.
That's kind of how it is. And this year, even more so.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that another time, maybe.
Another time.
So, another time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pilot episode done.
Is that 00 or 01?
Oh, I had this exact same discussion with our mutual friend Willem on our podcast / live stream / conversation called Teaching Tangents. And I don't know whether is a pilot 0? I don't know. Or is it 1? What do we say?
Let's just go with yes.
Okay, pilot, this is episode 1. Now complete. Thank you.
Thank you.